In the early 1990s, the Halloween franchise not only didn't have a home, but it didn't have a direction. After the lackluster box office and critical reception for Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, the franchise was kind of at a crossroads. They didn't really have an idea of where to go next. Halloween 5 was full of ideas. Halloween 5 was full of unanswered threads and plot points. You would think, at face value, there'd be a lot of places to go with the franchise from there. But the writers were stuck. The Akkads were stuck. As the franchise and the rights languished in development hell, fans were left wondering what was going to happen next. Halloween 5 definitely did not give finality to the character. John Carpenter was making a movie called In the Mouth of Madness in the 1990s when he had publicly spoken up about how he was disappointed with the direction of the Halloween franchise. See, John Carpenter, as we discussed in previous videos, was very proud of Halloween when it first came out. It was his brainchild. On a shoestring budget and against all odds, John Carpenter made a massive hit in what would go on to become a horror masterpiece and an undeniable classic. But John didn't really want to mess with Halloween much after that. He reluctantly wrote Halloween 2 and then did some reshoots for Halloween 2. He wrote and scored Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, and if you can remember, in the mid-1980s had expressed interest in coming back to Halloween. But it had been almost a decade since John had shown any interest whatsoever in the franchise. At this point, John was pretty upset with where it had gone. He felt that the franchise had become copy-paste. You take the idea of the original movie or its sequel, and you do it over and over and over again until there really are no stories left to tell except the exact same one. So John had an idea. While working with New Line Cinema on In the Mouth of Madness, they combined forces to bid for the rights to Halloween. The two of them as one entity, basically. John had this off-the-wall, harebrained idea at the time. Now, in subsequent years, you would see horror franchises take this step to varying degrees of success, and John Carpenter almost was at the forefront of all of it. There's not a lot of details about what the actual story was and the minutia of it, but John Carpenter wanted to take Michael Myers and Halloween into space. Yes, that is correct. The vacuum of space. Michael Myers was going to go to space. Now, before I expand upon that more, let me just say that it is very fair to wonder if John Carpenter wanted to do this because he had a passion for the idea, or wanted to do it because he almost wanted to kill the franchise. Because again, as John had stated many times, he was annoyed with the Halloween franchise at this point, and honestly kind of burnt. He had tried to come back a few times, and he did not have his needs met. His ideas were not met with warm reception by Mustafa Akkad, whether it be money, whether it be liking the idea or not. So it almost seemed like John was doing this to say, I'll just end this entire franchise. I will jump the shark to the point where nobody will take this thing seriously anymore, and it will no longer be a viable series. Now, that is speculation. I cannot confirm or deny that that is what John wanted to do, but it kind of seems that way. So what was the basic story of John Carpenter's Halloween in Space? Well, I mean, it was pretty simple. Again, I said this is tongue-in-cheek, but John was very serious about it. See, working with Miramax and trying to get the rights, he wanted to put Michael Myers on a space station. A space station, hunting people down, killing an entire team on a space station, stalking the hallways of a space station. That is what John Carpenter had proposed. Now, when you look at that and you hear that, you immediately think, oh, that probably would have been awful. And you may not be a fan of a lot of horror movies that went to space. Hellraiser Bloodline is a movie that I actually really enjoy. And I think that the idea at face value was a really cool one for the Hellraiser franchise. Having said that, the space stuff in Hellraiser Bloodline is the worst part about the movie. Whether that's execution, acting, writing, it is the worst stuff. Jason X, I actually have fun with, and a lot of horror fans nowadays have fun with that movie. And this is where it gets really interesting. For years, some have been left to wonder, did Jason X get born out of that idea originally? See, as I said, John Carpenter and New Line Cinema had teamed together to get the rights to Halloween. When Mustafa Akkad outbid them, John Carpenter at that point was completely done with the Halloween franchise. At that point, John would have nothing to do with it moving forward, aside from very quick negotiations in the late 1990s to direct Halloween H2O, which he wanted, I believe, $15 or $20 million for, and they said no. So you have to wonder, did New Line's idea with John Carpenter spur them into making Jason X years later? Nobody can confirm or deny that. But it wasn't exactly in vogue in the early 90s to send these horror franchises to space yet. That's when the talk really began. That's when the appetite for it seemed to perk up. John Carpenter has talked many times since then and around that time period that he was pissed off about what happened to the series. He wanted it to go a different way, starting with Halloween 3. He was very reluctant to do 2. Halloween 3 was supposed to be a new jumping off point for the franchise, which is why his Halloween 4 idea was even more interesting. To see that it went back to basics with Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, and then, to varying degrees of success depending on who you ask, went a little out of left field with Halloween 5, it definitely seems like John Carpenter really wanted to drive a stake in this series for the foreseeable future, if not forever. He didn't want to be asked about coming back again. He didn't want to get denied coming back again. He wanted to get the rights, do something that was totally off the wall, batshit insane, and hope that it didn't do super well, because then Halloween would live on for another 30 years. Is that a more cynical way of looking at it? Probably. But John Carpenter is cynical. And as you know, the guy doesn't like to talk about Halloween all that much. The guy has gone on to do many great films in his career. From The Fog, to The Thing, to In the Mouth of Madness. You name it. The guy wants to be known for other things, aside from Halloween. So it makes sense that he would want to do this. But curiously, I would have liked to have seen this. Because even if John was doing this solely for the purpose of trying to make Halloween lose any little bit of respectability it had left at that point, you still have a very competent writer and director on board, and I would assume he would have scored it. Come on, John Carpenter themes with the little spatial touch added in there? Please. But alas, Halloween never went to space. Halloween would end up going back to Haddonfield, going to Summer Glen, California, and back to Haddonfield again. A lot of people probably didn't want to see this idea. And I'm very happy with the movies that we got from that point forward, aside from Resurrection. But I can't say that I wouldn't have liked to have seen this just out of morbid curiosity. It's crazy to think that Michael Myers might have been the first to go to space. You saw the Leprechaun do it, Pinhead do it, Jason do it. Michael was probably going to be first. But it didn't happen. I wonder if John actually had a story for this. I wonder if there was even an early draft of the script. I wonder if there was any connections to previous movies. John had said at one point that it wasn't going to be a reboot or a remake. So some things would have had to have been canon. What those things were, we'll never know. Will Halloween ever go to space? I don't know at this point. It would be cool. Again, just out of morbid curiosity. But I can tell you all one thing. The horror master himself was very close to taking Michael Myers out into space. So next time we want to complain about what Busta Rhymes did to Michael Myers, or David Gordon Green did to Michael Myers, just remember, John Carpenter almost sent his ass into space. Would you have liked to have seen it? Let me know down below. But for now, we'll just have to wonder if Michael Myers could have ruled the entire universe.